Good afternoon. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I am the hearing examiner that will be presiding over this morning's zoning case. It's an application to rezone property to the Commercial Plan Development Zoning District. All testimony and evidence I accept during these hearings must be taken in under oath. So I will administer the oath at the conclusion of my remarks. Do we have members of the public here, or are they applicants?
Applicants.
Okay, so I will abbreviate my introduction, and I will administer the oath, and we will commence with the applicant's presentation. Okay. Please raise your right hand if you intend to speak on the record. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you enter into the record will be the truth?
I do.
I'm ready to begin.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. Good morning. For the record, my name is Vince Cotero. I'm the Vice President of Planning for Baracco and Associates based here in Fort Myers. I'm joined today by the president of our firm, who's also a professional engineer, Carl Baracco, and our clients that we're pleased to represent, two officers from Southern Gulf Construction Incorporated, the founder and president, Mr. Kurt Hambish, and Vice President Jamie Simpson. This is my first hearing in front of the hearing examiner, and I wanted to, if I may approach, hand you
Sure.
a few copies of my resume as documents to be submitted into the record.
You can just give me a brief overview of your experience with working with the Lee Plan and the Land Development Code, and then we can proceed.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a practicing planner for a little over 42 years. I have a master's degree in urban planning, and I'm a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've served as community development director for 5 jurisdictions in the state of Florida and worked for 2 different consulting firms. Most of my career, all but 3 years, has been in the state of Florida. While I never worked for Lee County, I did work in the private sector where I prepared applications for applicants as a consultant regarding the Lee Plan and the Lee County Land Development Code. Additionally, my work at Baracco consists almost 100%, not all 100%, but virtually 100% of work with the Lee County Land Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan, or the Lee Plan.
Okay. And how long have you been with Baracco?
10 months.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. I've also left you 2 copies of our PowerPoint presentation to be submitted into the record.
All right, this will be applicant exhibit 2. Thank you for the extra copy.
Sure.
And you may begin.
Thank you, ma'am. As you stated in your earlier remarks, this is a proposed zoning change to the Commercial Plan Development District from the Agriculture Zoning District on a piece of property a little over 5 acres located at 16521 Slater Road in the North Fort Myers planning community. Members of the project team, in addition to Baracco and Associates, included Bear Paws Environmental Consulting, who prepared documentation that is in the packet as well as referenced in the staff report. Mr. Baracco will talk about that during his presentation. The first slide that we have is an overview or an aerial of the property. As you can see, it is located on the west side of Slater Road, approximately 1/3 of a mile north of the intersection of Bayshore Road and Slater Road. The next slide we have shows a little bit different orientation on the location, as I stated, the acreage and the type of zoning. The proposal is to allow a contractor's office to be located in a former house of worship, the former Calvary Baptist Church, with outdoor storage and accessory uses on the property. Not all the slides are this slow. We just did it for effect. The master concept plan has been submitted and reviewed by staff and the shaded areas are the areas that are reserved for preserve areas and buffering existing tree lines. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the environmental analysis. And at the end of the presentation, there is a plan that looks similar to this, but it's the landscape and buffering plan, which was submitted on a separate document at the request of staff. Surrounding uses in this area are a mix. Mobile home parks, including the Julia Mobile Home Park, which is located almost directly across the street, the entrance on Slater Road. Various commercial uses to the north and to the south, but immediately surrounding the property is single-family residential with outdoor storage. Many of the properties that are zoned agriculture that have single-family on them do have outdoor storage, including different types of materials, as you can see, equipment, barns, sheds, and equipment material. I will talk a little bit about that towards the end. The property is designated suburban future land use, and a majority of the property is the same land use until you get to the far southwest, as you can see on our map here. Surrounding zoning is a mix, but there are a number of parcels zoned agriculture, AG2, immediately surrounding the property. And as you can see in the lower right-hand corner of the zoning map, there is some property zoned mobile home, but the Julia Home Park maintains the agriculture zoning. And then to the north of that park, which would be northeast of our client's property, is zoned MH2 as well. And you can get a feel from this map too of the different types of single-family uses and the storage that's placed on the property. I'm going to ask Mr. Baracco to talk a little bit about the environmental assessment and species survey and some utility and infrastructure issues. All right.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Carl Baracco. I'm a professional engineer with Baracco & Associates. I have been accepted as an expert in civil engineering in this venue in the past, and I'd ask to be accepted again today.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. I will go over utilities, transportation, and water management for this CPD, but first, in the absence of Barrett State School, and with your permission, I'll review his 2 slides.
Sure.
So the first is the environmental assessment. Again, this was done by Barrett State School of Barrett Paws Environmental. It was conducted on November 13th, 2023. The conclusion was there are no wetlands or other surface waters identified. There were no protected species observed. And for the most part, it's a clean environmental site. Next is the flux map that Mr. State School prepared, and it has 3 classifications. One is the commercial building, the second is exotics, and the third upland forest. So again, not much environmental consideration on this site. Next are the utilities. The existing site is currently served by Lee County Utilities for potable water. And in addition, we did get an updated letter of availability from Lee County Utilities. Sanitary is provided by an on-site septic tank system. It's currently in use, and if you recall back looking at the flux map, you'll see there's a lot of open areas, so that if there were either maintenance or expansion of the system required, there's plenty of room on site for that. So the utilities are pretty well intact. Transportation also was very straightforward. We looked at the existing church use and the proposed specialty contractor using ITE Trip Generation Manual, the 11th edition. And the conclusion is that Slater Road is currently and will remain at a level of service C. Finally, the surface water management. Again, it's an existing site. There is no formal water management system, but there is, in effect, a water management system in place, and that all the runoff does stay on site, in effect, a dry retention system, and then as it stages up, it overflows into the Slater Road swale. If there was ever a need for a formal system, it would be designed in accordance with Water Management District, South Florida Water Management District criteria, would provide dry detention and a control structure, but that's not anticipated at this time.
Does it just sheet flow to the swale on Slater?
It's got depressional areas on the site, and when those depressional areas fill up, they then overflow into the Slater Road swale.
And you won't be required to put in a stormwater management system?
If there were to make any other improvements, but there are none planned, and this system, it's an old system, it's not a
Are they
full.
going to approve the open storage area? Won't that trigger a development order?
My understanding was if they were going to add any impervious area or any new surfaces, but if they were not, that it would not. Either way, if there is a trigger, the point is there is adequate area for a modern water management system that would be designed in accordance with state criteria. That's all I have for you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like to talk a little bit about the compatibility with surrounding uses. We spoke of that earlier. The mobile home park located directly to the east, and there are homes, of course, mobile homes to the northeast and the southeast. There are various businesses, but again, those are located a little bit further north and south, agriculturally related until you get to the intersection, which you have some more brick and mortar buildings at the intersection. There is, I believe, an auto facility and a CVS facility that has been closed. The building is vacant in a McDonald's.
And there's commercial further north on Slater, you're saying?
There are some uses that are in the agriculture zoning district that are businesses. Not far north of there is a rental business and very scattered, but the zoning is agriculture in there. They're more rural type uses. They're not your typical brick and mortar that you would see in commercial zoning districts. Those are further south. This use, though, being classified as contractor builder in the commercial zoning categories, we believe is consistent due to its similar nature to the uses surrounding it, even though they're residential, because there are some uses that are non-residential, in addition to the fact that there are many that have outdoor storage. There are approximately 15, and I'm going to show that at the very end, structures that have outdoor storage, and some quite a bit more than our clients on their property that are in the vicinity. And additionally, we'd like to state for the record that the equipment and storage structures to be used are similar in scale to those that are found on surrounding properties. Would also just like to point out that one of the items in the staff report that we took note of that I wanted to call for the record is the fact that the staff stated that they believe that the proposed zoning change is consistent with policy 9.2.1 of the Lee Plan, which states that rezoning from Ag 2, to another appropriate category is consistent with the planning horizon. So we believe that with adequate separation standards that are proposed by staff, that compatibility from the proposed uses would be assured, and protection will be provided to surrounding properties.
But there aren't really ag uses on this corridor, in this area of the corridor.
No, but there are uses that are allowed in the agriculture zoning district,
Right.
including residential. You've got a
Right, but
plethora
we
of
don't have
property.
agriculture along this road corridor in this area.
There may be some in that area. I drive that road quite a bit. From time to time, I do see animals roaming some property on the western side. I don't know if they are, if they have received exemptions from the property appraiser. I didn't go that far in my research, but the uses are predominantly residential in agriculture zoning with some scattered commercial. This is the map I talked about before. The areas clouded in yellow show existing storage, and our property is designated in the highlighted, not quite a rectangle, but as you can see, it stands out.
And the road that runs along the south or the west edge of the property,
Yes.
that land is in Suncoast Estates?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I'm trying to figure out what is this area here that has open storage to the,
Yes, there's a road that runs parallel to Slater that provides access to those properties, and there are also east-west roads, and one of those east-west access roads or access ways is actually discussed in the staff report, provides access to our client's property. Our clients do not access on Slater Road directly, and we are requesting a separation deviation, which I'll close the presentation with, off the road or access way to the north. Okay. Here's a better look at some of the surrounding properties. We've included these in the staff report. Here's one that's 0.7 miles north, and you can see the amount of storage and activity that's taking place. Large equipment.
what's the nature of that business?
That, I believe, is, I don't know if it's an agribusiness or if it is just a residential structure on site. It's a steel building.
Okay. if you don't
Located
know.
along Slater Road. Okay. And we've taken some shots too, from to provide a scale for the presentation on Slater Road. These were taken a little over a year ago. Here we have some more aerial photographs that show single-family agricultural lots that abut the proposed CPD on the southern boundary. So you get a better idea of the scale of the property and how spread out some of the units are.
So you're saying there's no driveway to Slater Road from this property?
Correct. The access is on a roadway to the north, a small dirt roadway, and there's reference to this staff report regarding this roadway because we asked for 2 deviations, but the staff showed us in their language in the staff report that 1 deviation was not necessary, and I'm going to formally
Right, so you only need the
request.
one
The
deviation.
1 deviation, yes, ma'am. Right. But yes, there's no access way off Slater Road.
And there's going to be no access onto Shelby Lane?
It'll be just the current access point that they have now.
Okay.
We're recommending that remain and the deviation be granted.
But it's a dirt road, correct?
Yes. Some more photos and from different angles from the property and showing surrounding uses. This is a copy of the landscape and buffer exhibit. We've discussed this extensively with our client as well as the staff and received a lot of input and showed exactly how the buffering will look in accordance with the commercial plan development standards, and then morphed into recommendations from the county staff, which we believe are certainly fair and applicable in this case. And as I stated a moment ago, the 1 deviation would be, if I may try to hone in on it with here, off the access road here, and that would be the deviation to allow an 86-foot separation rather than the required deviation. Excuse me, the required separation. A community meeting was conducted on April 4th of '23 with the design review panel and community planning panel of North Fort Myers, and while the panel did not make a recommendation of approval or denial, they stated that they believe that the proposed use would be more suitable for commercial plan development, which is certainly the intent of our clients, in lieu of an industrial plan development, due to the fact the comprehensive plan would not allow it. We would be happy to answer any of your questions, and if you need to question our clients, I'm sure they'd be willing to, happy to
Well,
address them as
I'd
well.
like you to address the fact that it is quite a distance from, the commercial areas along Bay Shore, and the characteristics of Slater Road is primarily residential in nature, right? Churches can go anywhere. The LEAP plan recognizes that,
Right.
compatible in every land use category. But here, what I see is you're introducing a commercial business, a fairly intense one, in that it's going to have outdoor storage of equipment and materials associated with it. I'm just wondering what measures are being implemented in this site design to ensure compatibility if we can get over the issue of introducing commercial use in what is a residential corridor.
Separation between the properties through fencing and buffering, which is not consistent on many of the properties in that area. And a little bit further north, there's actually a business that sold honey, and they have quite a bit of outdoor storage in that area.
Walk me around the perimeter of
Yeah.
the site and what I am seeing in terms of if I'm standing at the property line in one of these homes.
Right. So what you're going to see in the area is buffering along the north end, west end.
Well, what is that buffering?
Well, it's going to be a mix of various trees, shrubs, and fencing or wall there.
Okay, so where's the fencing going to be, though? Is the fencing going to be around the storage yard or around the perimeter of the site?
It would be on the, well, fencing would be in this area where the storage is, and then buffering would be in this area here.
And is that like a type A, B, C? What's the,
Let me go back to the concept plan.
I'm not questioning whether this use can be made compatible, but I feel like there needs to be some presentation on how it is being made compatible, because we're essentially introducing a commercial use into a residential area.
Okay. On the north end, bear with me, I just want to go to the end with the, here. On the north end here, we are looking at an enhanced buffer, 100 linear feet, a buffer width of 30 with trees, double hedge, and on the area in the hatch would serve as a preserve area. And on the western edge, it would be similar to what you'll see on the northern end. On the eastern end, it would be an enhanced buffer, 170 linear feet, a buffer width of 45 feet, with trees existing and a double hedgerow tall. And then, of course, hatched area here would serve as a preserve along the roadway.
And what's existing in that area?
Right now, in this area, is a mix of trees and swale, and same here, but it would be enhanced through a subsequent application of development order.
I'm going to go to the flux map. Vince. Vince.
Pardon me?
You might want to go to the flux map and she can see the surrounding vegetation.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Let me go back to the flux map too. You get a better idea of it, I think. You get a better idea of current conditions in this area here along the flux map. And the goal is to enhance this where possible, where there aren't existing trees and shrubs now.
Okay, and the fence around the open storage area is going to be opaque?
Opaque fence? Okay.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
I also wanted to state that 2 letters of support for the project were submitted yesterday, and Mr. Mendez is in possession of those as well for the project. Any other questions, ma'am? Okay, thank you.
Madam Hearing Examiner, good afternoon. For the record, I'm Adam Mendez. I'm a senior planner at the Community Development Zoning Section. I have been previously accepted as an expert witness with respect to the county's Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code, be seeking for today's presentation. I'd like to present 3 exhibits, if that's okay. The first is the affidavit of publication for this hearing. It was probably a similar affidavit you received at your 9 a.m. hearing, where both of them were listed. But I'll present that as an exhibit, staff exhibit. I've got staff exhibit PowerPoint presentation, and I do have those letters, composite exhibit of the feedback we received from the surrounding community.
Okay, so these are letters from the community?
Yes, letters from surrounding neighbors that have their address, and both of them are in support of the request, and we can discuss that as how they can perceive the business before it's been approved.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now it was my understanding I was going to be getting a new master concept plan, but that didn't happen. So where do we stand on that?
Check on conditions of approval. Okay, so staff, in their recommendation, attachment E, the recommendation, there's 2 minor revisions that need to be addressed to align with staff's recommendation. We need to remove deviation marker 2 as the deviation's unnecessary. It sounds like we're in agreement there. And we need to remove an erroneous note on page 2 of the master concept plan, which is the open space and buffering exhibit, which states that makes a reference to a type E buffer note that.
Okay, so I didn't get that from the applicant.
Right.
So they knew about this before the hearing but didn't provide it.
Yeah, it looks like we may have to leave the record open to address those 2 revisions.
Okay, I just want to let you know that I am caught up with my work, so I'm ready to work on this as soon as the record is complete. But I have hearing tomorrow, and if I don't get it in before the record closes on that case, then this case will get bumped behind that one. I'm ready.
Okay. Not to overlap too much with Mr. Cotero's presentation, but I'll just go ahead at the top and say this is a request to rezone these 5.3 acres from agricultural to commercial plan development to permit a 6,500 square foot contractor's office and accessory open storage in the North Fort Myers planning community. I'm going to provide a larger overview of the surrounding land uses to provide a little more context to this area of North Fort Myers and its development pattern, and how that ties into the spot zoning discussion that we go into in the staff report regarding the adjacent land uses on all sides being residential in nature, immediately adjacent. So we'll start at the corridor here at the node, I'll call it, Bayshore and Slater, where you have a host of shopping, retail, and restaurant uses along this corridor. It's recognized in the LEED plan as a neighborhood center, and it's oriented for medium intensity uses that's going to be in a policy that I discussed later in this presentation. You can see as we go up Slater Road, we've got Slater Mills Way with some CG zoning, and the North Fort Myers Fire Station. We kind of leap across a couple of residential parcels before we get to our next commercial plan development. That is the Masons Lodge, or I'm sorry, the Knights of Columbus fraternal organization. Back in the 90s, I have this attached to the staff report, they rezoned a place of worship that went defunct, and they were able to achieve a commercial plan development approval for a limited CPD schedule of uses to allow the fraternal organization to repurpose the place of worship and use that, and has been used in perpetuity for that purpose. There's a future Wawa going in here at the corner. I want to make sure I don't just confuse that. They're in the development order stages right now, so it's anticipated that this corner will be have businesses on all corners in the near future. And just to kind of put in perspective the distance, it's about a third of a mile from the subject property to the Bayshore corridor, and less than a quarter of a mile before you get to the nearest commercial plan development designation surrounding the property. So I'll hone in to the property, and we'll talk about the adjacent land uses and kind of how those land uses are protected by the repurposing of this particular place of worship for this contractor's office and accessory open storage area. Given its size, and I guess I should back up and just reference that distance is depicted here, Madam Hearing Examiner, on the slide, and it is adjacent to 2 Lee-Tran bus stops that are serving this area of the Bayshore commercial node. So here's a view of the subject property from Slater Road looking west. This is 2019 aerial, or 2019 street photography from Google. You can see that the place of worship is in activity right here, and that this is really kind of the last views we have of the church before it actually went out of business, or they stopped with their services in 2020, shortly after this footage here. In 2023, you'll see that Southern Gulf Construction is actually occupying the site. This is currently an active notice of code violation. The property owners decided the abatement method to pursue abatement of this violation was to pursue addressing the use. So the letters you received in support are in recognition from the surrounding neighbors, and I've received phone calls too on what the activity of this case meant. Attesting to their neighborliness, that they run a business. It's closed on Sundays, I believe. They maintain their landscaping, and you'll see the discussion there in those 2 letters. But the surrounding neighbors I have not been contacted by with any opposition or concern regarding their activity. I imagine their activity will only be enhanced by this approval. They will have to go through at least some level of local development order approval to establish the buffers, to put up the fencing. If there's no impervious, meaning no crushed shell or gravel that's placed down, because that's considered impervious, and they're going to utilize the grass in a dust-free environment, that's permitted in the code, but there will be a development order process that will enhance these conditions beyond what they are today.
Won't they have to improve the dirt road to their access drive?
Yes, and I don't know if the entire road is dirt. Along the frontage of this property, I think there is some pavement. Is that correct? Yeah, but they will have to make improvements. They didn't request deviations from the road's construction standards for local roads, so those will have to be addressed at time of local development order. This is a view of Julia Park, which is directly across the street. You can see the sidewalk facility that runs north for over a mile and also connects back down to Bayshore Road to the transit stops that are located on north and south side of Bayshore Road. Just to give you an idea as to the mixture of residential dwelling unit types in this area. In 2001, the site received development order approval for the Calvary Baptist Church. At that time, they had plans for a future phase in the west half of the subject property that never came to fruition. What we have on site right now in terms of vegetation and their site orientation is largely intact with their existing development order from 2001. On this slide, I have a future slide that's going to superimpose the landscaping plan over this aerial to show you how the gaps are filled in, where there is a lack of vegetation, show you how the screening fits in, and just the scale of the open storage. So you can see the buildings overlaid there. You can see that, well, I'll move to the right of way here where there's a gap. You're going to have an enhanced buffer. And when I say enhanced, they have no deviations from the right of way buffer, which is a type D buffer that's required along Stacy, Slater, and Shelby Lane. In fact, each of their buffers is enhanced above and beyond the code requirements in both plant material and buffer width. They have provided supplemental plantings to provide effective screening for the existing parking lot and the church, which will remain the same. The building's not going anywhere. The parking areas are going to remain substantially similar. You'll see the planting that's occurring interior to the site after we cross over the open space and drainage system that's provided on the MCP, or the retention area. And you'll see the scale of the open storage. It's less than 1 acre on the property behind the subject property. And staff felt that with conditions locking these in, locking in the activity that can be the activity associated to the contractors and builders use group, it would not be any more intrusive to the residential environment than what is currently in place today and what can currently take place today with a place of worship, daycare, up to 100 kids, and some of those other place of worship activities. Do you have a question? Okay, just want to make sure I wasn't rambling on here. Some of those conditions I'll get into, but here's the master concept plan memorializing the 6,500 square foot building. There's an existing shed that's going to be fenced in. This is an OPEG 8-foot high fence. That's how it's listed on the open space and landscaping design exhibit. That's what's going to be conditioned as by effect of condition 1 of the plan development, should it be approved, that it must be made consistent with this plan development. I want to mention that they're providing 8 feet all the way around, where the code would only require 6 feet adjacent to right-of-way and 8 feet when abutting a residence. And the only area where they're actually abutting a residential property line is along that south boundary line, where we have at least 75 feet of separation. We're taking what they're doing is they're removing any exotics if they're already on site, and they're preserving most of the existing mature vegetation right from the get-go and supplementing in the understory to ensure that the 8-foot wall doesn't have a massing effect that would be incompatible or intrusive to the area. So you're going to be looking at a lot of landscaping before you get 75 and 100 feet in from the property, from the roads, before you get to this 8-foot high OPEG fence, which is going to be sufficient to screen the equipment and vehicles that are conditioned in the staff report, and we'll go over those. So again, this is my way of trying to convey the scale of the open storage and how central it is to the property and how it fits in and protects the environs, but also facilitating the intent of repurposing this church, which has been vacant for several years in this area. Now, there's a distinction between group 1, 2, and 3 of contractors and builders. And so the request before you is to allow contractors and builders group 3, and you'll see in the staff report, staff feels that this is, with the conditions in place, it's more in alignment with group 2. And I'll explain. Group 2 allows light indoor fabrication and indoor storage, and it does also allow some outdoor storage of materials and equipment if enclosed. And what it does is it specifically prohibits any heavy construction equipment such as cement trucks, cranes, bulldozers, well drilling trucks, and other similar heavy equipment, and it prohibits any wrecking debris or storage of wrecking debris, which is already prohibited by the code in other areas. Group 3 doesn't have the prohibition on indoor fabrication. It doesn't have a prohibition on heavy fabrication. or anything other than light fabrication. And it also doesn't exclude all of these recognized heavy intensity equipment and vehicles. So basically it's opening the gate. Group 3 is opening the gate for Group 2 to allow for a heavier, more industrial or quasi-industrial, depending on the scale, use. So the other discussion in the staff report is due to the suburban future land use category, and it's straightforward prohibition on industrial uses. We wanted to ensure that these conditions would restrain this Group 3 activity in a manner that would not be consistent with or resemble the character of an industrial property with things like large earth-moving equipment and things like that, which would be permitted if we just went unrestricted with Group 3. The conditions of approval that are notable are conditions 6 and 7. These are intended to both promote compatibility, limit the open storage, and also ensure that this particular project doesn't take on a more industrial character, which would be inconsistent with at least the optics of the the suburban future land use. So condition 6 broken down into several pieces. So the outdoor storage is limited to certain vehicles and construction equipment. The pickup trucks are limited by GWVR, which is gross vehicle weight. And there's a certain classification of these vehicles. It's Class 5 medium duty. This is an example of Class 5 medium duty vehicles right here, and it's recognized. So you're looking at like an ambulance. That's a Class 5 medium duty vehicle. You have these Ford pickup trucks with some 3-yard dump truck beds. You're not looking at semis or actual dump trucks. You're looking at kind of the medium-duty vehicles that will be adequately screened behind 8 feet of opaque fencing with the additional existing vegetation canopy surrounding the area. The additional equipment that's permitted by virtue of the language here is a maximum of a 3-yard dump truck. That's what we're looking at here. That's an example of a 3-yard dump truck. A mini excavator, skid steer, including concrete pump trailers. This is what is anticipated, what that condition is intending to limit the storage to, all equipment that should be shielded sufficiently behind the buffering and fencing that is provided on the master concept plan. Prohibited storage are vehicles and equipment that are depicted in the images shown here. We're talking well drilling equipment, cement trucks, large heavy construction equipment, and cranes. Those are all prohibited, and the condition is necessary because the use group itself would permit these if left without this restriction. Our transportation staff has reviewed this request in accordance with the administrative code for a zoning traffic study and has found that two components, found that this is a low trip generating use during peak hours, this business in general, with the square footage and the open storage that's proposed. The other component I want to mention is you might see on the use that the fire, EMS, or sheriff station is also listed in the schedule of uses. In the agricultural district, that is actually listed as a permitted use in the AG2 district through a special exception process. In reviewing what those transportation impacts might be with a 6,500 square foot facility, this facility actually generates more transportation impacts than that. We thought leaving that in there for future use, should this not succeed or be sold off in the future, would be reasonable. And our transportation staff is aware of that use, and with the condition that's recommended by the Department of Transportation, Lee County, there's a specific trip cap condition that you might see sometimes on some cases, sometimes not on some other cases, that limit the trips to a very specific generation. So I feel that the inclusion of that use will not promote a more intense use than the place of worship which is currently permitted, or the contractors and builders use that we're heavily deciding today. The applicant is in agreement with staff to withdraw deviation 2 based on the language in the LDC. Deviation 1 is recommended as approval by the Department of Transportation staff. With that, I would conclude that while this property is surrounded by residential land uses, it has 5.3 acres to really confine the site to an area where there'd be a negligible impact, if any, in recognition of the swap or the reuse of this building for a contractor's office and open storage. I feel that in doing so, it meets the land development review criteria for plan development rezoning. The deviation meets the standard. And I'm happy to address any questions if I didn't address something that you have.
Did you consider limiting the hours of operation?
I think that is something that was mentioned. Sunday, you guys aren't generally open. Saturday or Sunday. So we have to, the record's open for a post-hearing written submittal, so we can certainly look into that and see if there's a way to agree to something like that.
All right, I was just wondering if you considered that in your analysis of compatibility, given that we are introducing a commercial use to a residential area.
Yeah.
If you feel as though it's not necessary because of the existing mature landscaping and the planned enhancements, then share that with me. Otherwise, I'm wondering if perhaps that should be a consideration, that there would not be, you know, heavy equipment entering and leaving the site, you know, before 7 a.m. or, you know, after 7 p.m. or something like that, you know.
Yeah, that would be consistent with some other cases that I've had off in agricultural areas. So we will certainly address that in our response to you. Thank you.
And then I would just like to mention that when you submit your revised master concept plan, it should be dated so that the conditions can refer to the date that it was last revised. And okay, I don't have any questions. Thank you for a very complete presentation. Will the applicants be speaking? I noticed that they rose their hand to be sworn in. I don't know if
I
you were.
did that as a precautionary matter.
Just in case, yeah. So what is the nature of the business exactly?
We
Sir?
do structural
Can you
concrete
speak?
work. We do a lot, actually work a lot for Lee County doing water treatment plants.
Just because this is on the record.
Yeah, just state your name for the record and just explain to me what type of contracting business it
We
is.
do concrete work.
Your name first?
Kurt Hamsch. And we work for Lee County. We work out at Babcock at the water treatment plants around the area. So that's the type of work we do. We don't deal in real big equipment. We like the trucks he showed is what we use. We use concrete pumps, small ones. And we just use the yard for storage, wood and forms, stuff like that.
And all that'll be behind the fenced area?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
And we just try to be good neighbors, make everybody
All right,
happy.
That's what we want.
That's all I want to be.
That's what we want. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'm going to leave the record open. Today is the 11th. Do you need a week? How long do you need for this?
Today,
What's that?
today.
All right, well then,
Today is sufficient. Maybe by end of this week, just in case.
okay, why don't we say by noon on Friday?
Yes.
And then certainly I welcome it ahead of time because as I said, I am caught up at this moment.
How would you like for us to get that to you?
Submit it to me and I'll get it.
Right. He will make sure it's stamped received by DCD and he will get it to us. Thank you.
I'll try to have it today.